where it stops. We'll roll from there, I guess. Man, I'm excited today. How is everybody today? Yeah, fantastic. I tell you what, I feel like God is going to bring a word to his people today. And that, amen? I am totally excited about that. I tell you what, I was praying about bringing a message today when Pastor Tim asked me that. And Kelly could tell you, because she was on me about, I need this. And I was like, it's just not coming. Like, I was putting it together, but it wasn't. I was like, God, like, you got to give me something. Like, you, and it was okay, but I wasn't feeling it. And then all of a sudden, I felt like God was saying, go stay right in the unshakable faith. And you know, Tim has brought us, our pastor has brought us into the unshakable faith. I think we've been sitting in it a couple months now, literally. And I was like, okay. And I started to put this together. So I just want to set this up, that we're in unshakable faith today. But I think that must mean that God wants his people here at CFC to level up the faith game, huh? Like, that's it. So I want to set this up to you guys right now, like beforehand. Like, I feel like God is going to come at some of you today. So don't blame the messenger, okay? Like, we can just put it off that way and set it up right there. So we're going to dig in, but I feel like today is going to be a challenge. There's going to be some stuff that's going to come right at a lot of us. I feel like God has spoke really clear. I feel like we're in an area where he's ready for his people to start taking them serious. He's ready for his people to start putting some respect on his name. We're starting already, right? Like, here we are. So here, with that being said, we're going to jump to, we're going to jump to Numbers. If you got your Bible, if you got your electronic device, whatever, we're going to go to the Numbers. And we're going to start in chapter 13, and we're going to go all the way through 13, and we're going to trickle into 14. And we're going to look at some points in that, but then we're going to start digging in to that story. And we're going to learn that story, and we're going to start to see the Israelites and where they were, but we're going to see, like, man, why are so many of us no different than the Israelites back then? So let's go, let's move in. We have it here. So I'm going to start reading. We'll start right here. The Lord said to Moses, send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. From each ancestral tribe, send one of its leaders. Let's stop right there for a minute. This part right here, I want you to hold on to this. I want you to put this in the Rolodex as we go through this message today. And I want you to see a couple things right off the jump with the first two verses. See, the Lord said, this wasn't his neighbor. This wasn't his buddy saying this to him. This wasn't Aaron saying this to Moses. This was the Lord. But we go on, and he says, send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. This is the Lord saying this, and it's a promise. I want you to hold on to that, because as we start to go through, this book is full of promises that he gives to us. But the Lord says right here, I'm giving this land to the Israelites. He made a promise right from there. So hold on to that. So at the Lord's command, Moses sent them out from the desert of Paran, and, well, I'm going to probably mispronounce some of these, so stay with me as we read through this. Sent them out from the desert of Paran, all of them leaders of the Israelites. We're going to skip the next verses just listed out. There was 12 men, so we're going to jump to verse 16. These are the names of the men Moses sent to explore the land. Moses gave Hosea, son of Nun, the name Joshua. When Moses sent them to explore Canaan, he said, go up through Negev and into the hill country. See what the land is like. Whether the people who live there, are they strong or are they weak? Are there few or are there many? What kind of land do they live in? Is it good or bad? What kind of towns do they live in? Are they unwalled or are they fortified? How is the soil? Is it fertile or poor? Are there trees or is it not? Do your best to bring back some of the fruit of the land. It was the season of the first ripe grapes. We're going to stop there for a minute. I want you to see as we go through this story, before we start to dig into it, there's things I want to highlight right here. I looked at this and I started to do it. What do we have? The Lord said, send these men, go explore this land. So they're going to explore the land. What is it like? Is it good? Is it bad? What are we walking into? When I look at this, I think, why didn't he just tell them, I'm giving you this land, go take the land? Why we got to send some people to go explore it? You know, I sat on that one for a while, and I was like, God, why do they got to go explore it? You already said, I'm giving this to you. It was already a promise. And I was sitting with a pastor buddy of mine in Lansing last week, and we were talking through some stuff, and he said to me, John, you got to go slow to go fast. And I was like, what are we talking about? He goes, you got to go slow to go fast. In any given situation, John, You only get one opportunity to be proactive. And after that, everything else pertaining to that situation is reactive. It's really hard to be led by God in a reactive state. But in proactive, you can be still and hear God's voice. I thought, wow. I come back to this and I think, man, God doesn't miss a time to teach his children lessons. See, if we want to develop the character of God, there's going to be lessons along the way. He doesn't enable, he challenges. And I see it here and I think, man, here it is. It's like, hey, go explore this. Be proactive. Know what you're getting into. Or maybe it's just a test. Maybe it's both. Let's go on. So when they went up and explored the land from the desert of Zin as far as Rehob toward Lebo Hamath, again, whatever, they went up through Negev and came to Hebron, where Ahiman, Sheshai, and Talmai, the descendants of Anak, lived. When they reached the valley of Eshcol, they cut off a branch bearing a single cluster of grapes. 2 of them carried it on a pole between them, along with some pomegranates and figs. That place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster of grapes the Israelites cut off there. At the end of 40 days, they returned from exploring the land. We're going to keep going, but I want you to see something here. I want you to kind of get this. 12 guys, they go into this land. They cut off one cluster of grapes. They call it Eshcol because that name actually means cluster, large cluster. One cluster of grapes. You and I could go to any grocery store. We could go to South America. We could go to anywhere. And any of us in here could grab a cluster of grapes and hold it with one hand. This is the promised land. This is the land that God promised them. The cluster of grapes is so big that 2 men have to carry it on a pole. If you can imagine, the pole is on one shoulder, and there's my buddy, and we're walking in line, and the cluster is so big. This is the land that God promised them. They've been there for 40 days. They've seen it all. Now they're coming back. They come back after exploring the land for 40 days. They came back to Moses, verse 26, and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. They were there. They reported to them. They reported to them, to the whole assembly, and showed them the fruit of the land. They gave Moses this account. We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here's the fruit. Now I want you to kind of, I don't know the exact setup, but what it says here is that the whole Israelite community is here. I want you to kind of picture this. When I sit in this story and I start to think about what this must have been like, it reminds me, 40 days, the promise was already there. It reminds me maybe little kids somewhere around November 15th. We got 40 days before Christmas, but the presents start to come underneath of them, the tree. The names are on there. They know they're getting something 40 days. Can you imagine? All of the Israelites, they knew the promise was there. God said, this is your land. These guys are just, we're leaning on 12 guys just to tell us what's in the package, what we're actually going to be able to experience. That's what they're doing. Now, 40 days goes by. It's Christmas morning. Mom and Dad are finally out of bed, and we get to open the gifts. They're there and excited. Like, what are we going to have? I can only imagine, right? They come back together. They know where they went. That has to be the scene. And they come back and they say, the land is good. It's flowing with milk and honey. In fact, check out these grapes. They're so big, it took 2 of us to carry them for the last 3 weeks. We'll move on. But verse 28, but. Don't you hate it when we use that word but? It just cancels everything in front of it out. The land was flowing, but, so the land's really not flowing with milk and honey? What is it really? All of a sudden we start to wonder, but that gift, really, there really isn't anything in there? But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even seen descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites live in Negev. The Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites live in the hill country, and the Canaanites live near the sea along the Jordan. Verse 30, then Caleb, he's one of the guys, silenced the people before Moses and said, whoa, we should go take possession of the land now. We can certainly do it. We finally got a leader on the scene, right? One guy, we finally do. They're saying, but, they're so scared. But the men who had gone up with them said, we can't attack those people. They're stronger than we are. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land that they had explored. They said, the land we explored devours those living in it. What does that even mean? Isn't it kind of funny when somebody starts to feel a little bit of fear? When they feel like they might be backed in a corner and they really don't want to be pressed because they don't know the outcome, but there's somebody else there, why do we say dumb things at that point? It's what happens, isn't it? Like, let's be real. Like, we just say dumb things. The land devours those living in it. I don't even know what that means. All the people we saw there are of great size. We saw Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. That last sentence, we seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes. You want to know something? Many times, people that operate in fear have a poor self-image. We've all seen it. We've all seen it. They've been beat down so much that their self-image is so poor, they don't see themselves in the image of God. And again, we seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we look the same to them. They have no idea what the other person thinks of them. They made this up in their mind, and that's what they said. The image is there because they're living in fear. That night, all the members of the community raised their voices and wept aloud. When I look at that right there, I think to myself, that's Christmas morning. That's when Mom and Dad finally say, hey, we've been planning this whole time to actually fill those boxes, but we never could. There's no Christmas presents today. Can you imagine? They realize at this point, that land that God promised us, we've been waiting for 40 days to open it up. We've been waiting to see what it is. We're not going? Are you kidding me? All the members of the community wept aloud. It's got to be the biggest letdown ever. How could they do that? All of the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, if only we had died in Egypt or in the wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us to the land to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt? Wouldn't it be better to go back to where we've been slaves our whole life? Well, wouldn't it be better to go like we at least know what's comfortable? We at least know what to expect. Oh, over here, if we actually stand on the promise that God gives us, like we don't know. We have to go in faith. Over here, we would at least know. It ain't good, but it's at least what we're comfortable with. Man, it's so many of us, isn't it? And they said to each other, we should choose a leader and go back to Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron, they fell face down in front of the whole Israelite assembly gathered there. Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of that name, who were among those who had explored the land. They tore their clothes. Look at this, 2 guys, 2 of the 12, Joshua and Caleb. They tore their clothes. And they said to the entire Israelite assembly, the land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into this land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we'll devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. Man, I look at that scene right there, and I think to myself, can you imagine 12 guys, but 2 of them is all that stood up in faith. The rest were scared. What if you sat on a board somewhere with 12 people? You were hearing from God, but people were scared. No, we can't do that. What if it doesn't work? What if we look like fools? What if we just don't put carpet in? All this dumb stuff. I can only imagine I'd probably tear my clothes too. If God was talking, like, why would we not? Why would we not stand and dig in to the promises? Let's dig into the story. 12 people went to explore the land. 12 people went to explore the land. 10 of them came back with a spirit of fear. 2 of them came back with faith. Here's the message today. Faith or fear, you get to choose. Faith or fear, you get to choose. It reminds me of the story, the old Cherokee Indian story, where the grandfather says to his grandson, he says, son, all of us have 2 wolves inside of us. One is good and one is bad. And as we get older, one of them are going to develop into the man that you become. And the grandson looks at his grandfather and he says, Grandpa, which one is going to be in me? Which am I going to be? And the grandfather says, whichever one you choose to feed. Faith and fear. It's inside of every person sitting here today. You want to know what's going to manifest out? Whichever one you choose to feed. See, if you feed your faith, you will start to starve out that fear. If you feed your faith, you will start to starve out the fears. But if you feed that fear, you'll starve the faith. I want to look at some observations as we move through this. 12 guys. I want you to see this. 12 guys. They all were on the same trip. They had the same purpose. They seen all of the same stuff. They went to the same place. They slept in the same tents together. All of it. They had the same promise of God. Just like everybody here has the same promises of God. All of us. What was the difference between the 10 and 2? I'm sure there's a lot of them. But what I see in this story is that so many times we as humans, we tend to see things not as they really are. We tend to see them through a lens of who we really are. I want to say that again. We tend to see things not as they really are. We tend to see things through a lens of who we really are. See, we allow past hurts. We allow childhood dysfunctions. We allow fear of man, rejections. We allow past failures. We allow this stuff to start to define who we are. And in the process of that defining who we are, we start to take the lens of that and we fail to see ourselves through the lens of the Almighty Creator. So many times when we get in a spot where it's uncomfortable, so many times it sounds good, but when the rubber actually meets the road, when we actually get to a spot where, hey, something could be really bad over here that would be too hard to face if I actually step out, we pump the brakes. And you want to know something that's bad in that situation? Many times, at that point right there, we even reject the encouragement of the person with faith around us. Well, why do we do that? It's so scary. We see it in the story. Caleb jumps in the middle of it. I can only imagine what he's feeling. He jumps in. Whoa, 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 silence. Why is this conversation even happening right now? This is nonsense. God already told us this was the land. He already said that. We can go to the Word. Why are you so worried right now? Why is that diagnosis spinning you out? We can go to the Word. We know what it says. The promises is there. But you want to know something? When it actually gets to that point, the person of fear was like, oh man, I realize what this might say. But you don't understand. This is real right here. The doctor said this. The bank statement actually says this. My record says this. This is real. This is a maybe. This is real. And the person of fear pumps the brakes. Even under the encouragement of a leader, even under the encouragement of that. The difference in this story, the difference in so many Christians today is this. The person of faith, they can go to the promised land today. The person of faith can have God's very best for their life today. And the person of fear, they'll wander in the wilderness for the next 40 years. Faith or fear? We get to choose. You want to know what God showed me when I was putting this message together? It really humbled me. It put me on my knees. But it was really clear, and he spoke so clear. And this is what he said. John, most Christians will go to their grave and never experience my very best for them. Most Christian people will go to their grave and never experience my very best for them. It made me sad. They'll choose to wander instead of going to the promised land. They'll choose to wander because it's comfortable. They'll choose to wander because it's safe. They'll choose to wander because they think they have control. Oh, faith and control, I could give a whole nother talk on that one. But here's the thing. Worse than that, this is what hurts my heart the most, is that oftentimes they cause other people to wander. They cause other people to never get God's very best for their life because of their choices, because of their fear. Let's look at the story. All of the Israelites, all of them, the entire community, none of them, ultimately the two, but all of them missed the promise of God. They all missed out on the promise of God because 10 guys were too scared. You know how many young adults wander? You know how many kids come up and wander their whole life? You know how many people are sitting in this audience right now that have been wandering for 20, 30, 40, 60 years? All because there's a mom and dad that never planted their feet, that never decided to really stand on the promises of God, all because the culture in their home was a culture of fear. You know how many people wander their whole lives, but they never experience God's personal best. They never get the promised land. Because you and I choose fear. This isn't a message of condemnation. That's not it at all. Romans says there's no condemnation for anybody in Christ Jesus. Don't take it that way. This is a message of challenge. This is a message of God saying He wants His people to level up. It's time. It hurts my heart. It's not right. It's not the way God created us. So many times it's so scary that we're not able to do it. We fast forward the story. The Israelites missed out on God's very best. They wandered for 40 years. And most of them died in the wandering. Why? Why did they choose to feed fear and not faith in their life? That's a question. I'm sure there's a lot of them. But here's what I think. I got a couple reasons that I know of, and I think it's this. They forgot what God had done for them. They forgot their past. I look at the story and I think to myself, how could they forget that God just released them from slavery? That's all they ever knew was slavery in Egypt. How did they forget this? This wasn't years ago. This is months ago. How did they forget that? How did they forget the day that Moses showed up and said, God told me to rescue you out of this? How did they forget that Moses said to Pharaoh, let my people go? How did they forget that he threw the staff on the ground and it turned into a snake and he picked it up and it was gone? How did they forget that he put his hand in the coal and it comes out leopard and he puts it back in and it comes out clean? How did they forget this stuff? How did they forget that when they were backed up against the Red Sea, it was the 9th hour, there was no humanly possible way for them to be saved? How did they forget at that point when it looked like no hope that God parted the Red Sea and they walked through on dry ground? How did they forget? These are big rocks, right? This is not years ago, this is months. How did they forget that stuff? Couple months ago, I was in Lansing. It was a Wednesday night. I was down there for work. I decided to drop in to a prayer meeting at a church. And I went in and this woman was talking, and she was giving a lot of these accounts. And she was actually talking about the book of Acts and the power through the Spirit and why so many churches and so many Christians don't actually ask for it or allow it to manifest in their lives. But she said in the mix of that, and that wasn't my point here, but she said, I don't know about you, but I've never seen the sea be parted. I've never seen a staff be thrown on the ground and turn into a snake. I've never seen blind people be able to see. I've never seen this. This is the stuff she was saying. And I was like, yeah, I never have either. Like, I'm taking notes. The next morning, I'm sitting in my hotel doing my quiet time, just me and God. And I started that. It's just quiet. And I'm like, God, I've never seen this stuff. It'd be so much easier. I've never seen the sea be parted. Like, man, that would level my faith up. Like, whoa, now that's for sure real. You know? Like, wouldn't it? Isn't that what it is? Like, man, if Al walks up here and throws something down and it's a snake, like, I'm getting back. Like, uh-oh. Like, there's some crazy stuff happening, right? But you would believe it. I'm like, God, I haven't seen that. And he spoke so clear to me. And he said this, John, when I brought you out of your past, when everybody thought you were going to be a loser for life, you did see me release my people. When I freed you from a 15-year addiction, you seen me say, let my people go. When I blessed you with a wife that you're totally physically attracted to, both physically and emotionally, you seen me throw the staff on the ground. John, when I opened your wife's womb and I gave you 2 boys that you're able to hang out with, that you're able to shepherd their heart, you seen me put my hand in the coat. John, when you prayed for a little girl and I blessed you through adoption with a little girl that was exactly the way it is, you've seen this. John, when I broke multi-generational curses that have been in your family tree forever, and it stopped with you, you've seen me say, let the people go. John, when this stuff happened, you've seen the miracles. And you want to know what I realized at that point? Is that people of fear, we often think it's the small things that we forget. And it's not. It's the big things. It's the big things that we forget. I often think that if we flip the script, if we took ourselves right now and we took the book and we gave it back to the Israelites back then, you want to know what they would be saying? Probably no different than what I was saying in the hotel room. I've never seen the sea be parted. And they'd probably be like, God, you never showed us this thing called a car that somebody could turn heat and air conditioning and drive all the way across the country in a day? God, you never showed me an airplane? That's unreal. It flies through the air and we can travel the world in a day? God, you never showed me something called a telephone that I could communicate. You want to know something? They'd be saying the same thing, and you and I have forgot those things. People of fear, they don't forget the little things. People of fear, they tend to forget the big things. Point number 2. People of fear, they become satisfied with the present. Instead of going to the promised land, they chose to wander for 40 years. Instead of experiencing God's very best in their life, they chose to wander for 40 years. These are children of God, destined for greatness, living in the wilderness. Promises made, and they live in the wilderness. Sure, it's the Israelites, but it's us too. Why do we choose to wander? I want to tell you this. When God brings us to the place where He wants us to move forward, when He brings us to the test, because it's going to be a test if you want to level up. It ain't for free. When He brings us to the test and we make the decision to not choose faith, when we make that decision at that very moment, let me tell you something. God will let you wander. Oh, He will let you wander. He'll let you do your own thing. He'll let you have what you want to have. He'll let you be the person you want to be. He'll let you be satisfied in your little world. Sometimes it even feels okay. Sometimes you can think that things are okay in your little world. Oh, He's going to let you do that. But let me ask you this question. After the Israelites wandered for 40 years, after they were out there wandering for 40 years because they said no to God, where did He bring them? He brought them right back to the spot that they said no to God 40 years prior. He brought them right back. Oh, they did circles, but He brought them right back. I don't want you to miss this right here. God will never let us skip the lessons He has for us. God will never let you skip the lessons He has for you. I promise you that. Oh, you can try to avoid them. I have. I promise. You can delay them. I have. I have. You can try to fight them if you choose. You can wander through them. But when you're ready to go to the promised land, when you're ready to actually be used by God, when you're ready to say, man, I'm going to change the family tree forever starting with me, when you're ready to actually plant your feet and square your shoulders and say, not on my watch, no, it ain't rolling like this no more. When you're ready to do that, God's going to bring you right back to the spot of disobedience. There's areas of my life that I look back on. I wasted 20 plus years. 20 or more years. God called me to go into ministry. I made some bad choices. I come home and God called me to go to ministry. But I thought business ownership. I wanted the house and the boats and I wanted snowmobiles and I wanted all of this. And life was okay. He let me wander. But 25 years later, I'm standing in the same spot that God was calling me to be able to give me His personal best all the way back then. You want to know the best part about that is this. Is that when you get back to that same spot of disobedience, He's going to ask you the exact same question that you failed to hear in the middle of your fear all that time before. Are you ready to go to the promised land? Are you ready to experience my personal best for you? This will be the question. Why wander? He made it clear to me, so many people will go to their grave and never experience it. Why? So how do we actually feed our faith? How do we do that? How do we flip the script? Because this stuff is real in our lives. I'm not minimizing it one bit. I've lived all of this stuff. I could have put this message together for no one other than myself. That's the truth. Fear causes us to forget the good things that God has done. Faith causes us to celebrate the good things that God has done. You want to know? Point number 1, gratitude. You better learn to be grateful. You better learn to be grateful. And I'm not saying grateful when it feels good. I'm saying grateful no matter what. You ever been around a person of faith? Oh man, the Lord is so good. They could break their leg. Oh man, the Lord is so good. He's given me so many people to help me out. Oh man, it's so good. I told you 2 weeks ago as worship leader, my buddy's dad, he's a person of faith. His daughter-in-law passes away unexpectedly with a 5-year-old girl. He wasn't worried one bit. Oh, God knew this before she was born. It's perfect. We're so thankful for the time we had with her. Everything is great. I'm thinking like, whoa, this girl doesn't have a mom. Doesn't feel great to me. 3 years later, his son passes away. There was no difference. Man, God is so good. I'm thankful for the 40 years I got with him. Man, you know the lessons that I did? You know how my character got so much more closer to Jesus is through the lessons I've learned with him? Man, this is so good. God knew this. It's such a blessing. Not easy, right? But people of faith, they're grateful in the good and bad. I want to tell you this. I want you to hear this clearly. The only way to grow up spiritually, the only way to grow up spiritually, to become mature and well-developed in your faith, the only way to become well-developed in your faith is to go through the fires of testing, to go through the trials, to go through the tribulation, to have these troubles come upon you. The only way that you're ever going to do it. You want to know why? Because an untested faith is an unreliable faith. If you ain't been tested, we can all say everything that we're going to do. But when the rubber meets the road, then we're going to see what you're really going to do. If you're never tested, if you never go through that, we don't know what the faith is really like. You better learn to be grateful in the trials. That ain't so fun, is it? See, here's the thing. We hate the process of refining that makes us more like Jesus in our character. All of us hate it. You want to know why? Because to refine anything is to put it through the fire. So if we're going to refine our character to be more like Jesus, it's going to involve pain. It's going to involve sorrow. It's going to involve hurt. There's going to be upheaval in your little world. I promise you that. But the reality is this. The good news is in Romans 8:28, we know that all things work together for good for those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. That's the thing. There's a promise. There's a promise for you to stand on. Learn to be grateful when it doesn't feel like you want to be grateful. Learn to be grateful when it hurts. Learn to be grateful when your emotions are spun out. Learn to be grateful when it doesn't feel like that. Here's the thing. We're never going to get rid of fear in our lives. It's no different than that Cherokee story. Faith and fear, they're going to be present always inside of us. Just the one you choose to feed, that's what's going to manifest out into the person that you become. Fear causes us to despair our future. Fear causes us to think, man, what's going to happen? What if it doesn't work out? What if they die? What if they get lost? What if I lose my job? What if I can't pay my bills? What if I go bankrupt? Fear causes us to despair our future. Faith enables us to depend on God for our future. That's what it does. It allows us to step out and actually depend on God. Fear is a result of being self-dependent. Fear is a result of being self-dependent. Faith is a result of being God-dependent. That's a hard one, isn't it? Number 2, you need to learn to be God-dependent. You got to learn to lean on God. You got to learn that in the hard times, it doesn't matter. Oh, it's easy in the good times, but in the hard times, you got to learn to lean on God. You got to learn to know that. You know, I tell you this was a hard one for me. You know, John 15:5 says this, I'm the vine, you're the branches. He who abides in me, and I in him, bears much fruit. For without me, you can do nothing. Yeah, amen. You want to know something? I used to struggle with that. A person with a dominant personality, I'd be like, what do you mean? This dude doesn't know God. He's riding snowmobiles right next to me. This guy doesn't know God. In fact, man, I don't know what he makes, but it seems like he makes more than I do. Seems like he's doing some stuff without God. I used to think that. I used to think, man, you know, I could just do this, Like, I could do this. And we can spin that any way you want. But you want to know something? In my study, I started to realize something. That what that really means is this. Is that without God, without being God dependent, you will do nothing of eternal consequence. Oh, you'll be able to do a lot of stuff. Oh, He'll let you wander. He'll let you die in the wilderness. I promise you He will. He gives us the free will. But if you want His personal best, if you really want the promises that He's given us in this book, if you want that, you will do nothing of eternal consequence without learning to lean on Him. I'm telling you, learning to lean, I called it learning to lean because I started to realize that so many things happen in our lives. They're real. The feelings are real. The emotions are real. But so many times, the reaction, and that's what it is. Because we're not proactive. If we jump all the way back to verses 1 and 2, why did God not just tell them, go take the land? Just take the whole crew and walk there. Because the lesson was there. It was time to level up. And I'm sure there's a lot more. But gratitude and learning to lean on Jesus are the two that are going to level you up in your faith game. When you get that diagnosis from the doctor, you better be thankful and you better learn to lean. When you have a child stuck on drugs and you don't know if you're going to get that call that they're dead or alive, you better learn to lean. You better be thankful for the time you've had with them. There's people here that have gotten that call. When you no longer that, when you've been battling pornography for way too long and your spouse doesn't know, but you're wandering and you wish it was different, but the shame is there, you better learn to lean. You better learn to lean. When you have a child that doesn't know Jesus, you better learn to lean. When mental health comes into your house and the fear is real that you don't know if your loved one is going to commit suicide or not, you better thank God for the time that you've had with them. And you better learn to lean. You better know who you're dependent on at that point. Oh, you could try to control it all you want, but you better learn. When you don't feel valued by your spouse, when your love tank is empty, you better learn to lean. When your wife hasn't had sex with you in months, you better learn to lean. It's hard, right? It'll devastate a marriage. You better learn to lean. When you're at the point of divorce, when you just come out of a divorce, you better thank God that He's given you that man or that woman, His son, His daughter. You better learn to lean. You better learn to develop the character of Him. You better dig in at that point. When God calls you to sell a business and follow Him, you have no idea how you're going to pay your bills. You better be thankful that He's given you the skill set to do whatever He's calling you to do. And you better learn to lean on Him at that point. You can choose to wander. He'll let you. But you better lean. When your car breaks down, when you have no idea how you're going to fix it because you don't have the money, you better learn to lean on Jesus at that point. When God calls you to give of your time, your talents, when God calls you to give your money, oh, this is a hard one for people. But I only have so much. What if He said He wanted you to go all in? You know how few people would put it all in? You better learn to lean. I don't know what it is for you. The list goes on and on. We all experience real life, and it goes on and on. But I do know this, is that if you can develop a spirit of gratitude in good or bad times, it doesn't matter what it looks like. If you can develop a spirit of gratitude and you can learn to lean on Jesus, if you can really learn to be God dependent, you will develop a faith that is mature. And if you actually do that, you will probably be one of the few that actually experience unshakable faith. See, here's the thing. I go through this whole book right here. There's so many promises for you and I. There's so many promises in this book. But you want to know something? One that He never puts in here is easy. God doesn't promise easy. He just promises worth it. I don't know where you guys are. As I wrap up, we're going to sing this song. Some of you will laugh at this because it's an old school hymn. Some of you like hymns. I really don't for the most part, but that's okay, right? But it's an old school hymn. But I just want to ask you, is there anybody else in here besides me? Was this just for me? Because my hand would be the first one up for sure. But is there anybody else in here that recognizes that they're in a season of wandering? That they're not experiencing God's personal best right now because things have happened over the years. Somewhere they missed the question. Is there anybody in here with a show of hands, or is it just me? Oh, it's a big part. All right. Yeah, God knows, right? I want to say this song and then we're going to sing it. I just want to say the lyrics to this song because it's really good. This is how it goes. It says, learning to lean. I'm learning to lean on Jesus. Finding more power than I've ever dreamed. Isn't that it? I'm here to tell you right now that if you actually leaned on Jesus, if you had a spirit of gratitude, if you actually stood on the promises of this, you would have more power. The Bible says that if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could move a mountain. I look at that and think, man, most people I know and myself, we're a bunch of chumps when it comes to faith. I'm learning to lean on Jesus. But here's line 2. Sad, broken-hearted, at an altar I knelt. I found peace that was so serene. That's right here. Sometimes people have to just let go. Sometimes people, I realize it's a cement floor. That would be really uncomfortable. That's okay. Some of you, as we sing this song, you might want to come up here. Sad, broken-hearted, at an altar I knelt. I found peace that was so serene. And all that he asks is a childlike trust. We know what that is. It's so innocent. You know how easy a childlike trust is? But we've let baggage keep us from a childlike trust. All that he asks is a childlike trust and a heart that is learning to lean.